Next curve.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Next Curve's Rethink webcast series on security and trust, where we talk about the hot topics in the world of privacy and trust that matter. And today, we're going to be talking about a lot of stuff. We have a lot on our plate. I mean, it's just the beginning of the year, and we're out of the gates with just, I would have to say, just pure insanity. There's just so much to cover. But of course, as always, I'm joined by Debbie Reynolds, the data diva of Debbie Reynolds Consulting LLC. How are you, data diva?
I'm well. Thank you, Leonard. I'm happy to be here. This is so much fun.
Yeah, and I love your scarf, as always. It's just amazing how many varieties that you have, and they just make you look fantastic.
Thank you. This one is from Spain.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
wow. So this is like an international, it's a global collection.
Oh, it is. It is. Yeah.
Oh,
I have a thing. Yep. It's so cool.
Yeah. So we have a lot of things that we're going to cover. And just before we start here, though, remember everyone to like, share, comment on this episode, and remember to subscribe to Next Curve's Rethink podcast at www.next-curve.com, as well as on YouTube. We're also on Buzzsprout, so you can subscribe there. Just look us up, Next Curve, Rethink, and then subscribe, listen, and you'll get your constant diet of the insights that are both tech and industry that matter. And so with that, Debbie, let's get started here. A lot of crazy stuff. The first thing I want to talk about is Apple, because for the longest time, I think we've supported them in their mandate and their mission to put privacy first, right? Trust and security. And I think we would argue that they've been kind of the gold standard out in the industry in terms of, driving that mission for their customers and bringing that value through their products, their solutions, and their services. And yes, they've been challenged in that mission, but I think there's been always a sense of merit in terms of how they executed. Although now I'm starting to see some, let's call them, issues with the sustainment of that mission. And in particular, we saw Apple sidelining its Apple Intelligence news summary feature because the BBC complained that the Apple Intelligence summarization feature was producing inaccurate summaries. So what do you think?
Yeah. Well, unlike here in Europe, they have laws about the accuracy of news.
Yeah.
So for them, it's a big deal. And, we know that these things can make mistakes. And if there isn't someone really very vigilant on watching it, we know that they can go off the rails and do different things. And so I think, pulling back the feature makes a lot of sense. Maybe, refiguring how you do that. Obviously, and this, you work with these summarization things and it, it can be wrong in bad ways, especially in news, right? Where this is something where people are really relying on it for accuracy. And so to me, this is just an example why you either maybe need to use different use cases for this stuff or really have more humans involved in that process.
Right. Or maybe even not using it at all. I mean, I thought, quite honestly, I thought that Apple would have better judgment and be a bit more responsible. And in fact, I think this is a perfect example of irresponsible AI, where you're putting, not only the user, but society at risk of bad information or inaccurate information for the sake of putting out a product. And, quite frankly, I'm pretty disappointed by this. And also, when we think about other features that they're introducing in their operating systems across the board, things like notification summaries, email summaries. I found that, quite honestly, I have to be very honest here. Apple Intelligence doesn't do things better than the other quote unquote tech companies out there that have put out similar types of features. And I think this is where these companies really need to tread very carefully. And quite frankly, I thought Apple knew better, but apparently they don't. And maybe they should check themselves before they wreck themselves, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think my thought about the way that Apple is trying to do Apple Intelligence is that they wanted to be sort of a safe space for people who weren't comfortable with going out into the wild and playing, using all these other tools. And so for that, I think it's fine. But for those of us who are maybe looking for something a bit more, different, more robust, give you more flexibility, it may not cut it, but maybe that wasn't the goal in the first place. I thought it was just kind of like, let's socialize AI for people so that they don't feel like they're missing out, even though it may not be kind of the best, there is out there.
Yeah. And I think it does highlight a problem, as a lot of the conversation around consumer AI has gravitated or transitioned or is being pivoted toward agentic. When you have these types of reliability issues, right? These quality issues, how are these agentic AI frameworks that propose to personalize things for you? How much utility will they actually provide? And I think again, especially when we start to get into agentic automation, these guys have to be really careful. And I think definitely you and I are going to keep a close eye on this dynamic and how it's playing out, or this new pivot and how it's playing out. But I think we're seeing early evidence of how these on-device models are actually quite limited, and you do really have to be very careful. I would say the feature that I think has proven somewhat useful, even though I don't use it very often, is the image playground, where I put together a Christmas card for last year. That came out okay, but then obviously, what you're doing is you're prompting, you're feeding that context window, or at least it's feeding itself photos of your family members, yourself, and creating cartoonish type images that you can then, use tools like whatever, Adobe, Photoshop, or what have you, PowerPoint, to put together some content. But that's kind of safe and harmless. I thought that's where Apple was going, but I think they might want to tread cautiously, because they had to back the stuff out, right? So
I think that's true. The thing that concerns me a lot, and is that a lot of time, one of the things I don't like about the way that AI works, especially on like devices and personalization, right? Is like the way the algorithm works, it infers things about you, and it assumes certain things that you would want or you would like, right? So an example, even though this wasn't Apple Intelligence, the feature that I absolutely hated on Apple, and I loved all the features, right, was the memories, where they like take random things from your photo album and say, hey, remember this? Remember when your dad had cancer and you were, took a video of him in the hospital? It's like, you don't know what I care about or what I want to see, right? So I think if they're going this route, definitely tread lightly, because you may make people very upset about the things that you're assuming or inferring or trying to, lead them toward, or try to help them. Being too helpful, right? Being too helpful.
Yeah, maybe trigger a bad day by
totally
a memory that you don't want to
Yeah,
necessarily
totally.
want to dwell on that morning, right?
Yeah, it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
remember your husband cheated on you that you know, looked at this text 10 times. It's like, I don't really want to see that, so
Oh,
yeah.
wonderful. Okay. Well, okay, sticking with Apple, here's another thing that I saw that didn't quite make me exactly happy is apparently in iOS and I assume the other device OSs, whether it's Mac OS and iPad OS, at least with the iOS 18.3, that release, a lot of the AI functions are going to be default opted in. So it's all turned on, and then you have to actually proactively go in and turn that stuff off. And I thought Apple might learn from the Microsoft recall incident. And, I think this is like a data diva no-no, right? Can I
It
qualify
is.
it as such, right?
You
This is
can.
not what we do.
You
Um,
can. I was disappointed in this. I have been an Apple lover since, the first Macs come out. And, obviously I take a critical eye at this. And I love
yeah,
most of the stuff that they
absolutely.
do. I was very disappointed in this because, this is the same company when they did app transparency. They opted everybody out of
Out.
advertising, and then we had to opt in. And we love that, right? And so obviously they know how to do this, but the fact that they chose not to do it here and then have people, not everybody
Yeah,
wants to use AI. Not everybody feels like that's important to them,
absolutely.
right? So I doubt I probably don't use like a fraction of the features that I
Yeah,
have on my phone now, even before you
yeah,
add AI, because I'm just a simple person, right?
right.
Maybe I don't need all the bells and whistles, and most people who are using their phones probably aren't using it to that extent
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah,
So to create something that makes them have to stop what they're doing and try to, dig
yeah,
down into the settings and turn things off, especially this thing that they had done recently with Siri,
yeah.
where they had opted Siri in. They had opted people in for Siri to share certain things, certain
Mhm.
information on apps you have on your phone or something like that. And you have to actually go into each app and like
Yeah, right.
disable it. And I'm like, I know that they know better to do this. And so yeah, I mean, it's not a customer first, it's not a privacy first. My thing is that it wasn't really communicated really well, and I feel like what
Oh,
they what was communicated was, here are all these cool ways that we're going to protect your data and secure it so it's private. And it's like, but that's not the point. The point is I want control
yeah,
over my choices and not to have you opt me into things that I don't want. So I
right,
can opt
right.
in myself.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think we're in total agreement here. And of course, Apple, if you would like to come on and explain yourself at any time, we're more than happy to speak with you. And if you'd like to come on, yes, because, I think these are the things that can really damage a brand's trust, consumer, um, you know, faith and trust in a brand. And, I think once you've compromised that trust, it's really difficult to earn back. And I have to be honest, I'm really starting to scratch my head about Apple. And that's not a good thing for Apple. I can always switch to something else, right? It's just hopefully the folks at Apple think a little bit more intensely about what they're doing here and prescribe to our recommendations on what privacy first strategies are and how they can benefit your brand. So why don't we move on to LinkedIn? I know that this is a particular moment, if I can put it that way, that sort of triggered you, if not very much triggered you. And it's that interesting notice that we got about the AI training of our information and engagement on LinkedIn. And of course, LinkedIn is owned by Microsoft. So what's the deal, Data
Yeah.
Diva?
Very concerning. Also, this is another one that people are like super upset about, because someone had found they were just going through the settings. They found they were opted into this AI thing that you have to opt out of, and so the concerning thing is, okay, especially in the US. So
Yeah.
if they opted us in to this thing, that means, like, let's say if you were on LinkedIn for 20 years. So they took
Yeah.
20 years of your stuff and put in AI. And then in the US, depending on what state you're in, if you opt out, they don't necessarily have to erase that any of that data that they've already gotten, right? They
Yeah.
may only have to opt out. They may only either have to say, well, going forward we won't do this, or we'll delete some of your data up to a certain point. But really, actually there's a lawsuit that was filed in California about this particular thing. And so
Yeah.
we'll see. We'll see. I mean, part of that is trying to figure out why they did it and what they're doing with that data. And so if it doesn't settle, I think we're going to get a lot more details about what's
Yeah.
happening or what has happened with people's data with this. So people are very unhappy about that, as was I, because
Yeah.
I look at it was funny because I had recently, when the person sent me the message, I'm like, I had recently go through periodically the settings, and I noticed it was a lot more choices than there were before. And I was like, what's all this stuff? Right. And I had gone through it recently, and this is one that I didn't see. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I see almost all this stuff. So the fact that someone like me who follows this very closely can miss something like that, like what would
Yeah.
the regular user, a regular person who doesn't have time or the head
Yeah.
to do this would do. So yeah.
Yeah. And again, I think we run into this problem where they opt you in by default. And so, you're participating without consent and assumed consent on the part of the platform or service provider. And I think this is really where we start to have issues. And, but it's also from a brand perspective, and I mean, again, we're just really surprised that Apple is adopting this approach. Apparently, it is that it not providing consent, compromises trust. I mean, if you're going to be using or intending to use our information and our engagement on a platform to train your AI or for any other purpose, consent, I mean, that's common courtesy, right? It's not like you're paying us to train your products and build your products, right? I mean, we should be compensated. I think that's the mindset that consumers should more broadly and increasingly have. And I think they will eventually. I think that movement is growing, and because we have, privacy advocates like you and I who are making people aware of what's going on, the nature of privacy and how it's being compromised in many regards for corporate purposes. But I think that consent mechanism has to be clear, has to be apparent, and should be accessible, and sometimes it's not, right? So
Yeah. I guess I'll go broader. I'm going to say agency, right? So we want control. The control is what we want, right? So when whatever vernacular you want to use to express what that means.
Yeah.
Like we want control over how our data is handled. And so maybe I decide, okay, I'm fine with that. Okay, I'll opt in or whatever. But I think the farther these companies get away from being able to articulate how something benefits me as a user makes me even more suspicious of them doing stuff like this. Because I don't care about any of that. I don't want any of that. So why would you opt me into that? Like, how does that benefit me? It doesn't.
Right. And it also highlights the issue with, the challenges with these models regarding the right to be forgotten, right? That becomes a real significant issue, especially as we look at these privacy regulations probably getting more entrenched in the future, right? And so I think these could very easily become headwinds for a lot of these technology companies, quote unquote tech companies, that are trying to cater to global markets.
Yeah. Well, the right to be forgotten is different than deletion. So the right to be forgotten has a broader scope, and we don't have that in the US. So we don't have a right. We don't have a right to be forgotten, and even the deletion rights that are articulated in our laws, depending on what state you live in, you may only have the right to delete stuff like maybe a year, maybe 2 years, but beyond that, like let's say you were a customer of AT&T for 20 years, right? You can't say, forget me for 20 years. Like we'll forget you for 2 years, somewhat, we'll delete some of your stuff, but not all of it. So that's another reason why this LinkedIn lawsuit is going to be very interesting, because if it goes forward, they'll have to really explain what deletion means.
Yeah.
What opting out means,
Yeah.
how long they keep stuff, what do they do with the stuff that they took, and what did they take? That's what everybody's concerned
Yeah.
about.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So let's move on to Meta. I guess the big news item has been that Meta AI can now use your Facebook and Instagram data to personalize its responses. What are your thoughts there? This is a pretty crazy month, right? And it's just the beginning of the year. We have the rest of 2025 to look forward to.
Yeah. When you think of personalization, you should always that should indicate to you that there's some privacy issue there somewhere, right? So personalization just means we're going to take more of what we know about you, and then we're going to try to use it in a way that gives us the right to have it, but then give you something in return, whatever that is, right? But as usual, a lot of these data exchanges are very asymmetrical, right? So it's like, okay, well, you like this color lipstick, or you go, you like to eat at this restaurant, but then that data is packaged up and sold to someone else 1,000 times over, right? So all you got was a recommendation, and what they got was more data to sell about you. So it's always concerning, right? So to me, the value exchange needs to be a little bit more. I don't think it'll ever be even, but it needs to be it needs to be more compelling, and I don't see a compelling argument for doing this personalization, especially if people don't want it. So it looks like they're going to just turn it on and just say, hey, I'm personalizing all this stuff, especially with a company like Meta, where they have different properties. And so people interact with these different apps because they want them for different reasons. Like I don't see someone, let's say for instance, someone has Facebook and WhatsApp. They probably don't want anything they're doing on WhatsApp to ever go over into Facebook. You know what I'm saying? So I mean, that to me, that needs to be a consideration as well.
Well, yeah, and I think there's a question of how did they design their personalization engine around these large language models or these personalization AI models, right? I think that's a real big question. And how does it secure your privacy, and how does it isolate your I don't know if you call it data, it's embeddings, basically. How does it protect those embeddings? Because that's private information. And so if these models know about you, but there hasn't been enough isolation of the data and the embeddings to, institute privacy for those insights, those preferences. I don't know. I don't know how these things work. I don't know if they've published it, but I think they need to.
Oh, absolutely.
And I haven't seen anything. So anyone from Meta, if you're willing to share,
come on.
I'm happy to bring you on board and tell us how you are protecting people's privacy and instituting privacy first principles in the implementation of your products and services. So I mean, it's a You know what? I would turn this stuff off. I wouldn't use it. And
no, I wouldn't either.
Yeah, I mean, I would use things that are on device before I would turn any of this stuff on. And I think there's architectures that would allow you to get personalization benefits without necessarily having to give up your, having this memory, if you will, persistent so this lingering question of, well, how is it protected, right?
Yeah. Well, I'll give you an example of something that happened to me this week, and this is a Gemini thing. So I was invited to a meeting, right? I was not the host of the meeting, right? I'm just an attendee, and then this Gemini thing popped up, and I guess it was their system. So I pressed, you press the button, they say, "Oh, I'm recording," or do whatever, or some for the transcript. So I guess they were like, "Oh, well, Gemini is going to do this transcript and this summary or whatever." And so the way the meeting was, I did my speaking and then I left the meeting, right? Mm-hmm. So later I get a transcript of the meeting, and it has a transcript, it has a summary of what I said, but then it has stuff that happened in the meeting where I was not there.
Really? Oh, geez.
And I thought, who did this? Like, this is so bad. This is so bad. Like, a lot of people in corporate America, they do meetings like that where someone drops off and they talk about something else. Yeah. Now you created this huge loophole. And so that's what concerns me when people say they want to personalize or whatever. They're not really thinking about who should know what. It's almost like spycraft, right? Need to know and all that other type of stuff. Like, I don't see that being folded into a lot of these innovations. They're just like, oh, this is this cool thing, and we should just share everything. It's like, no, that's not. Like, no, that's not okay at all.
Yeah, and it's really difficult. Security is really, really challenging issue with these things, and what I mean by things like RBAC and being able to control access all the way down to the embedding level, right? I mean, we're talking about if it's RAGed or if it's a standalone model that you're interfacing with. These things are very, very difficult to do. And so architecture, how you designed it, where's data stored, ingested, and embedded in all these different possible elements in a quote unquote AI platform or application. These are things that really need to be asked. I don't hear anyone asking these questions. They just assume that these things work, which is, I think, if you're an enterprise out there, and you're a CIO, make sure you ask these questions and that you are very clear on what your company is using in terms of external service and what you're actually bringing into the enterprise, and what enterprise grade AI with enterprise grade security and confidentiality protection, what that looks like. Because I'm telling you right now that these are things that are not apparent and clear at the moment. Is one of the things that are really stymieing enterprise adoption of generative AI tools and applications. So,
and not everyone needs to see everything, right? So there's a problem there. If this actually came up with recall, where they were like, well, let's just index everything on the computer regardless of the user, right? So you're going to take all the different user profiles and scramble everything together so that whoever has access can see it, but not everyone who's using that computer should see everything that everybody else is seeing, right? So to me, this is like a theme that I'm seeing in terms of you're basically creating an unauthorized access issue that could be, could be a harmful safety issue, like in a personal situation, or it could be a confidentiality issue in the corporate setting.
Right, exactly.
Almost, I Because I mean, I remember when companies were trying to do enterprise search, and it was bonkers. It was
Oh,
totally crazy because it was
I
so
remember
bad.
that.
Because it's like,
Yeah.
how did that get in there? You know, it's like because you
Security.
didn't secure your data the right way.
Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah.
That's how. Right. So we still have those problems, and what we're doing is bringing more complexity and more technology that's bringing up things. So
Yeah.
maybe we're hiding in plain sight, not no longer. But we don't really have the security around that or the barriers that need to be there
Yeah.
to have people use it or be confident in it.
Yeah. And, we're not just managing content anymore, or documents and information. This is like knowledge, right? There's like this layer that synthesizes a corpus of knowledge that is informed by content, by information, or, like data. And now you have to figure out how do we security trim this thing so that it only shows and it only acts like it knows, or it refuses to respond to certain folks based on access controls that have been defined, right? And that whole exercise is very, very complicated. And I haven't really seen anybody out there, quite honestly, that's cracked the code for that. And this is a huge gap at the moment. And again, anyone out there who claims that they have a solution, please reach out. Would love to talk to you. So we'll put that challenge out there for folks. I think this is going to be a regular thing we'll do now. It's like if you have a solution and we didn't know about it, give us a jingle.
Yeah, bring it
and see if you actually have something real. So, you and I, we like to keep it real, right? So that's what we do.
We do.
So, okay, let's move on to the next thing, which is, oh my gosh, this is like the news item that has shook the world. DeepSeek, right? It's an it's a AI lab actually out of Hangzhou in the Zhejiang province of China that has released a model that is on par with anything that's in the Western world. It arguably can outperform even GPT, GPT 4.0, and does this at a very, 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 very competitive economic profile, meaning the price of the training or the cost of training was 1/10 of what it took to train comparable llama models by Meta. And also its inference costs are ridiculously low. And so now the AI world is grappling with this, the advent of this model, but then also I think people are going back to the basic question, or at least maybe ignoring the basic question of what's the difference between a service and the model. That because there's a lot of talk about open source and how open source blah blah blah. I think that's a topic for a different discussion. That really doesn't. That has more to do with, let's say, regulatory and export control type stuff. And then, some of these open versus closed parties wanting to claim bragging rights. But then there is the question of security and privacy, right? Because we have now TikTok. That issue continues to be a factor that's an open issue, if you will. That the Trump administration is negotiating some sort of resolution on. But then now we have this. I just read that. DeepSeek, their AI bot or assistant, is the number one downloaded application on the Apple Store. What are your thoughts here? And how should enterprises and consumers think about this?
Yeah. Well, it's definitely gotten people's attention because of the on one side, we have a lot of talk about how much money that these companies need, how much more money they need to be able to do this stuff, how much more power and all this stuff. And then you have this group out of China doing similar things for a fraction of the cost, not even with, the most advanced chips. And so I don't know, maybe necessity really is the mother of invention.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very
Like,
interesting. But I mean, to your point, a model and the service is different, but if you have a model, you can create a service. So
yeah.
I think
Yeah.
if they wanted to go that route, it wouldn't
Yeah.
take much to do to go there. And so yeah, I think these companies should be concerned. And I know a lot of the talk, the Stargate stuff that we're talking about, it's all about energy, but I think it's all about chips.
Yeah.
So the fact that we're saying, we see we see the stock market go up and down based on who has the most advanced this or advanced that. And so now you have a group that's not using the most advanced this or advanced that, or have $1 trillion in their back pocket. And I think they should be concerned, because that's what these companies don't want to pay an arm and a leg for AI, right? And so having it at a cheaper cost to be able a cost of entry, and
Yeah.
also maybe it creates more situations where maybe companies wanted to leverage AI and couldn't do it
Yeah.
because of the cost. Maybe that opens that up as well. But I think there probably going to be some friction here, because this is out of China, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It reminds me of, I don't know, decades ago where there were bans for Russian diamonds. So
Yeah.
apparently, Russia has tons of diamonds, and they don't want those diamonds to get out to these other markets because it would like make diamonds go like way down in terms of cost and stuff. So I think we're probably going to start to see more of that on a like global scale where they're like, hey, you have to buy our expensive model because we're gonna ban this other thing.
Yeah.
But then,
Yeah.
the internet doesn't really have boundaries. So, there are gonna
Yeah.
be people who are gonna be able to use the stuff regardless. So it's, really interesting.
Yeah, and with the model itself, it can be deployed on device or it can be deployed in a data center. A service provider can leverage the model to provide like a service. I think the thing that is a big question mark is with DeepSeek, their own hosted service, right? What are the privacy and security risks associated with that? And I think there's no lack of concern in the United States at the moment of Chinese entities harvesting information and maybe even encoding and embedding human profiles, personal profiles onto a model that they're or at least an AI service and platform that they're hosting. And I think that these are the things that I think after all these years, actually 2 years, I don't think we've really gotten really good at having a clear discussion about what that risk structure looks like. I know that there's a lot of people who have opined, and you're probably one of the only people that I know of who have looked at this problem holistically. So, but the question of what does safe AI look like, not only from a consumer's perspective, but an enterprise perspective as they look at external parties providing these services. What does that look like, and how do CIOs and tech and business leaders evaluate these companies? And then, I think, and these services, right? And these applications. And I think for consumers, I think it's almost like a hopeless thing, but there has to be something done. And I know that you're working on a lot of stuff in this regard, but things seem to be moving faster than human consideration, right? And the things that can be instituted in terms of protective regulations and policies, right? I think it's a big gap right now.
Yeah. I think the gap is that there isn't, it's one thing to say that, we think that there's danger if you do this, you
Yeah.
use this tool from whatever. But what hasn't come out is why and what that risk is, right? So part of choice, and maybe this goes back to my thing about agency, is for people to know what that risk is. And so
Yeah.
to not articulate what it is not helping.
Yeah.
That's like me saying, instead of me saying, don't touch the oven because it's hot, I just say don't touch the
Yeah.
oven. You're like, well, why not? Well, just don't. I was like, well,
Yeah.
why? I was like,
Yeah.
I think it's really dusting up people's curiosity more than it
Yeah.
needs to. And
Yeah.
so I think it's going to be hard to convince someone that it is harmful if you don't explain how it's harmful and why. So
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
that's what's missing. So you can say, I don't know. It's almost like it's cartoonish in a bad way. Like it's like the what is it? It's the movie device where everything is around this one thing, the MacGuffin, right?
Uh-huh.
It's a MacGuffin, right? So we don't know what it is exactly. It's the light in the suitcase from Pulp Fiction. That's what it is. So unless you're going to open the suitcase and tell
Yeah.
people what's going on, you can't stop them from
Yeah.
trying to go in these ways, especially as it comes to money, right? We see, especially a lot of these small or medium-sized businesses, they want to edge, right? They want to
Yeah.
be able to do stuff with AI, and so they don't have $1 trillion in their pocket to do this stuff. And
Mm.
so I think any company that can create, give people access to something that they would not have otherwise had financially is going to have an edge, period. Whether it's
Right.
Mars
Mm.
or Venus
Mm.
or China, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. 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 And I think that question of how needs to be asked about how are these companies doing the things that they do, and in particular in regards to privacy protection and security. I think we'll just have to continue to. I mean, you'll have to continue to do the good work that you're doing, and hopefully, this podcast is elucidating or highlighting some of the considerations and questions to be asked. But anyways, let's move on to the last topic that I know that you want to chat about is a chain of thought and this new threat or risk. I don't know exactly how you want to characterize it, but maybe you can share it with our audience.
Yeah. So there are some researchers that have been doing some work on AI models that use this kind of chain of thought reasoning. And basically, they were saying they had come up with a type of adversarial attack that basically can jump into the chain of thoughts and maybe change or tweak things that the model is doing to be able to give an output that may be wrong in some way. And
Uh-huh.
so this can have huge implications depending on how companies are using these models to make decisions, right? And I think we almost see this in movies, right? Where someone
Yeah.
goes into some computer system and they make some tweak or change that no one's thinking about. And, this can really happen. So basically, as we see all these new architectures come up and these new ways to, manage data in these models, there are always going to be adversaries out there that are trying to manipulate it. And, it's becoming easier for them to do it, right? Because that cost of entry is much lower. And so as companies are really relying on data, maybe overly relying on data for
Yeah.
models, they really need more humans in the loop to be able to catch those types of things. But, this is something that's really not on anyone's radar because they feel like, oh, well, let's just put this thing in the model and, we think it's better than a human because, humans suck. And so computers are better and all this stuff. So, we have adversaries who can manipulate these things, through and not in obvious ways. Maybe things
Yeah.
are more subtle that may play out over, days, months, years, as opposed to what people think. Okay, if they're going to come in, they're going to take something. Maybe they want to come in and they want to throw you off track or put you in this, go in a different direction or something that you maybe wouldn't have done. So it's just, to me, I read these stories and I always think, well, what could they possibly do? What would be the risk here? So,
Yeah.
it fascinated me that that's the way, this particular attack is not like a head on. It's kind of like a sideways thing, so yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I have nothing to say or add to that. Definitely something I need to look into, but I think that one of the things I'm really looking forward to is RSA C 2025, because I think we're going to see a pretty significant attitude change in the cybersecurity community as they look at these new tools. Oh yeah, here's the other thing that came out is OpenAI fast following Anthropic coming up with an agent, right? That basically can take over your computer screen and execute tasks, right? Discover how something works and then executing tasks. And I don't think that anyone has really raised a question about, okay, what are the implications from the perspective of a bad actor using this and weaponizing it and using it as a tool to basically cause harm. And I think a lot of these innovations look really cool. Some of them are not as novel as people think, but their ability to do harm is apparent. Their ability to provide benefit, not as much. A lot of these are hypothetical. And I think that's one of the things that business leaders, if you're a board of directors, stop putting pressure on your organization. Do a little bit more homework, because some of these technologies are not what they're cracked up to be. Some of these solutions are actually quite dangerous. So you might want to, listen to your CISO, give them a little bit of credit, and maybe save yourself some headache, and maybe save yourself some money instead of like investing in these experiments. Working with the CISO to come up with measures for safe adoption of these technologies, right? Because they're going to come anyways. I think, being first to implementing a potentially dangerous application within your enterprise or a tool within your enterprise may not exactly be the best thing for your organization. And, you as a consumer, not a great thing either. So,
yeah. Depending on what
final word.
Yeah, depending on what you want the agent to do, I still think a lot of the stuff that people should be trying to do with these models should be the kind of low risk, low harm stuff.
You've been saying that from the beginning. Yeah.
If it goes bad, it's not going to harm someone, right? It's not going to create a harm. But like, I hear people like, oh, well, let's give this agent your credit card number, and Leonard likes the aisle seat on, United Airline or whatever. And so,
how did you know?
The cyber criminals like I don't have to infiltrate Leonard in his life. I just have to get a hold of this agent, and then having them book flights for him, I can book flights for me and my criminal enterprise and the places that I want to go and do stuff, right? But then they'll be like, well, it's your fault because you should have, known that you shouldn't have done this. So it's like, stay with the low risk, stay with the low, the annoying tasks you want to automate. To me, really, the agent thing, a lot of what I think generative AI and these agents can do will probably be doing things that no one would care about. It wouldn't be on the front page of a paper, right? It would probably be these low hanging fruit automation. Like for people who don't know how to automate stuff already, it may be just an easy way to automate a couple things, right?
Yeah.
And so that's fine. It depends on what it is, but not giving them your credit card and the code to your house and car and stuff, because the cyber criminal was like, hey, this is so cool. We can do theft, automate it in automated ways.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I still want to know, how did you know? Yes, United aisle seat. That is my preference. That is creepy.
That is my preference.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, hey, Debbie, thanks so much for jumping on and kicking off 2025 with this podcast and sharing your insights and perspectives on some of these topics that really should start to concern us going into 2025. And I want to thank everyone for tuning in. And if you have any questions or would like to get in touch with Debbie Reynolds, who is the Data Diva, go to www.debbiereynoldsconsulting.com. She is doing wonderful work. And if you have any questions about what is happening in privacy and security, she is absolutely the person to be talking to. And if you'd like to engage with NextCurve's research, go to www.next-curve.com and you can tap our research portal there, as well as our media center, where you can find links to all the past and present podcasts and other media that I am engaged with. Just go there, and obviously you can subscribe to the Next Curve Rethink podcast here on YouTube as well as on Buzzsprout. And so once again, Debbie, thank you so much, and we'll see everyone next time.